Okay, so today we will be studying about the next poem in the Exploring New Horizons. That is your book for semester 5 in compulsory English. So the second poem is Strange Meetings, which is written by Wilfred Owen. So first talking about the author. So Wilfred was an English poet and a soldier, and he was regarded as one of the finest poets of the First World War. So he was born in a middle class family, and he had a very comfortable childhood. So he got selected in army in 1950, and there were some number of traumatic experiences, which resulted in shell shock. So shell shock is basically the post traumatic stress disorder. So later, when he was in the time of that medical leave, so he started writing poetry. So he was more and more influenced by the war poet known as Siegfried Sassoon. So now talking about this poem, that is Strange Meeting. So Strange Meeting is one of the most important poems which talks about the horrors and futility of war. Okay, so the poem is written in the form of dialogue between two soldiers who have died in battle and are meeting in an imagined landscape which this speaker identifies as hell. So they reflect on the hopes and dreams in the life they were living, and they lamented, means they were वो अफसोस जता रहे थे over the inability to convey the hopelessness of war to the living. So the poem also carries a message of reconciliation, forgiveness and harmony, and is known for some of the most moving lines in modern war poetry. So starting with the poem, it seemed like I escaped from battle down into a very deep, dark tunnel, a tunnel that had been carved out of the granite bedrock by some enormous wars in the past. So telling it seemed that out of battle I escaped down some profound dull tunnel long since scooped through granites which titanic wars had growing. Okay, so moving on to the next paragraph, which says, yet also there encumbered sleepers ground too fast in thought or death to be bestirred. Then as I probed them, one sprang up and stared with piteous recognition in fixed eyes, lifting distressful hands as if to bless, and by his smile I knew that sullen hall. By his dead smile I knew we stood in hell. So this particular paragraph means even in the tunnel I found people moaning and suffering. Okay, they were either too deeply asleep to be stirred or they were already dead. Then I poked and prodded them. One of the sleepers jumped up and stared at me. He seemed to recognize me and he pitied me. He lifted his hands sadly as if he was going to bless me, and I could tell from his lifeless smile that the dark hall in which we stood was hell. It was an imagined landscape. With 1,000 fears that Vision's face was grained, yet no blood reached there from the upper ground, and no guns thumped or down the flues made moan. Strange friend, I said, there is no cause to moan. I'm so sorry. None, said the other, save the undone years. The hopelessness, whatever hope is yours, was my life also. I went hunting wild after the wildest beauty in the world, which lies not calm in eyes or braided hair, but mocks the steady running of the hour. And if it grieves richlier than here. For my glee might many men have laughed, and of my weeping something had been left. So this means that you could see all the fear on your face, even though none of the blood or violence from the battle above Up above reached the hall where we stood. You couldn't hear the artillery firing down there. The guns didn't make the chimneys in the hall ground. I said to him, that is a unfamiliar friend, there is no reason to be sad down here, he replied. No reason except for all the years I'm missing out on and the loss of hope. You and I had the same hopes. I threw myself into seeking the most beautiful thing in the world, and I'm not talking about physical beauty. This beauty makes fun of times as it steadily passes by. If this beauty is sad, its sadness is much richer than the sadness we find down here in hell. If I hadn't died, my happiness might have made a lot of other people happy too. And even in my sadness, I would have left. Okay? Next paragraph, which must die now. I mean, the truth untold, the pity of war, the pity of distilled. Now men will go content with what we spoiled, or discontent, boil blood and he spilled. Then will be swift with swiftness of the tigers. None will break ranks, though nations trek from progress. Courage was mine and I had a mystery. Wisdom was mine and I had mastery. To miss the march of this retreating world into vain citadels that are not walled, then when much blood had clogged their chariot wheels, I would go up and wash them from sweet wells. Even with truths that lie too deep for taint, I would have poured my spirit without stint. But not through wounds, not on the chess of war. Foreheads of men have bled which where no wounds were. Okay? So this is the third paragraph. Moving ahead. So something important behind something that cannot survive down here. I am talking about truth itself. So the truth that no one talks about, the horror of war, war boiled down to its horrifying essence. Since I didn't get to tell people how horrible the war was, people will be happy with the destructive things our armies have done, or they'll be unhappy and they'll get so angry that they'll keep fighting and killing each other. They will be as fast as tigresses. No one will speak out or disagree with their governments, even though those governments are moving society away from progress rather than towards it. I was full of courage and mystery. I was full of wisdom and expertise. I won't have to change. I won't have to watch the world as it moves backwards, marching into the cities that foolishly don't have fortifications. They don't have anything. And they are not protected by walls. Okay? If the wheels of their armored vehicles were too clogged, means too filled up or blocked with blood, I would go wash them with water from pure wells, like from wells where we get pure water. I would wash them with truth. I would wash them with truth, too profoundly true to be corrupted. I would do everything I possibly could help, except for fighting, except for taking part in more horrible war. In war, even those who aren't physically hurt, but they suffer from mental traumas. Okay. Next paragraph. I am the enemy you killed, my friend. I knew you in this dark, for you frowned yesterday through me as you jabbed and killed. I parried, but my hands were loath and cold. Let us sleep now. So he tells him that I am the enemy soldier you killed. My friend, I recognized you in the dark. You were angry when you saw me in just the same way as you were angry yesterday. When you killed me with your knife, when you jabbed me, I tried to fend you off, but my hands were slow and very clumsy and cold. So he then tells him that let's sleep now, let's take some rest in this hell. Okay? So this is the poem which tells you about that there is still some hope for reconciliation, for forgiveness, for being kind. So fighting and violence never gives you answers for anything. But yes, forgiveness, reconciliation do help you to live your life happily, and it helps you to find out truths which have been missing since a long time. So I think now we will be discussing the question and answers. So the first question is, what does the poet refer to as strange friend? So T.S. Eliot referred to a strange meeting as a technical achievement of great originality and one of the most moving pieces of verse inspired by the war. Because see, when those two soldiers died, finally they had to meet in hell. So that war, of course, is World War One. The central element in all the poem is Owen's relatively small story about two soldiers who died. Where does the speaker find himself in the beginning of the poem? So in the poem Strange Meeting, the speaker escapes battle down some profound dull tunnel in the earth. Here he encounters sleepers, presumably most corpses, and also has an interaction with a dead German soldier. This makes him think that the tunnel is in fact hell. What, according to the dead man, is the destination of the march of this retreating world? So at the very beginning of Wilfred Owen's poem Strange Meeting, the speaker describes how he has escaped from the battle into a profound dull tunnel which has been scooped out of the earth as a result of the lengthy warfare, that is World War One. Going ahead, what does the dead man want to do at the end of this monologue? So, in Disabled, a soldier who has lost his legs waits in an institution. He hears voices out in the park. He thinks about how he will never attract a woman as they all look at him as if he is diseased. His mind wanders to his days before the war when he was football hero and dreamt of glory. He joins the wars for ferocious reasons and never thinks about Germans or fear, he thinks of heroism. Now he knows that he will have to be taken care of for the rest of his life and wonders why the nurse has not come to wheel him to bed. Okay, so the next question is, how does the poet describe the place he finds himself in? So in Strange Meeting, the speaker escapes into hell. There a dead soldier jumps up and addresses him, discussing the hopelessness of war and the inability to understand the truth. And at the end of this speech, the dead man tells the soldier that he is the enemy that he killed and says that they should sleep now because he cannot do anything about it. Describe the person that the poet encounters. So in Strange Meeting, the soldier in the war who makes contact with the spirit of a dead soldier. The poem begins with the relief of a soldier as he escapes from the war, but then realizes where he was when he sees the dead soldier. The spirit tells him that the joining war is simply the waste of your life. With 1,000 fears that Vision's face was ingrained, what was the fears that the poet is referring to? Explain the meaning of this line with reference to the context. So in Strange Meeting, the people who want to show their heroic side, they join the war. Okay? So instead the poem treats war as horrifying, wasteful, dehumanizing, in which the soldier describes that the pity of war distilled. So according to the poem, war destroys the landscape in which it's fought. It erodes the natural solidity, plus it gives you trauma and it even gives you post-traumatic disorders which they have to feel even after the wars. Okay, as he tells about the deep dark tunnel in which he finds himself talking to that dead soldier, where he sees that fundamentally this force has destroyed the whole place where they were fighting the war. So indeed, they have uh, personified that particular place as hell. So the violence of the battle has been deprived, and the speaker thus portrays war as force that permanently damages and diminishes both the landscape and the people who fight it. Describe the hopes and the dreams that the speaker in the poem seem to share. So Strange Meeting presents a pretty bleak view of human society, which seems unwillingly to stop fighting, yet the poem also presents that violence as a choice something that people decide to engage in rather than something innate to human beings. So the two soldiers at the heart of the poem might very well have been friends in different circumstances, but maybe they were sharing the same hopes, same dreams. Whatever the hopes is yours was my life also. So, but later on they were meeting in a place where the soldier has killed him, and now they cannot help it because the spirit wanted to shed off the blood. He wants to wash the chariot wheels because he cannot see that damage which the war has done to the landscape plus the people who were fighting it. So I mean the truth untold. Write a short note on the truth that is being referred in here. So Strange Meeting is a poem about war, but it doesn't focus on heroic deeds or grand victories. Instead, the poem treats war as horrifying, wasteful, and dehumanizing. In the words of the enemy soldier, it presents the pity of war distilled. So according to the poem, war destroys the landscape in which it's fought. It erodes the natural solidarity between human beings, turning people who might be friends into mortal enemies. So the truth is that it is not foolish to imagine a better world, and the enemy soldier lays out some of the dynamics of that world. People will know the truth untold about war. That's horrifying and glorious, and they will work to avoid it. Indeed, he imagines himself repairing the damage caused by war, washing away the blood that is filled up in the chariot wheels. So the next question is the significance of the title of the poem. So Strange Meeting is a poem about war, but it doesn't focus on heroic deeds. Same I told you, it focuses on the truth. So meeting, the spirit makes the soldier also realizes that he has actually seen the truth which is untold. So everybody talks about the heroic deed, that the war was fought like this, that the war was fought like that. But the truth is, even those who were friends were somewhere or another, they shared the same hopes, the same dreams. Though the enemy soldier has been killed in battle, the poem takes up his message, offering it to the reader. And in this way, the poem critiques war on the enemy soldier's behalf, asking the reader to turn away from violence and turn towards reconciliation, forgiveness, and solidarity. Identify the references in the poem that imply that it is set in an imagined hell. Why do you think the poet chose such a setting for this particular poem? So Strange Meeting was written by British poet Wilfred Owen, a soldier in the First World War. Owen wrote Strange Meeting sometime during 1918 while serving on the Western Front, though the poem was not published until 1919. But after Owen had been killed in the battle, the poem's speaker, who is also a soldier, has descended to hell. There he meets a soldier from the opposing army who reveals at the end of the poem that the speaker was the one who killed him. So the poem is deeply negative as it reflects on the shared humanity of these two men and the bordered horrors of war. Though the poem suggests that human beings aren't going to stop fighting anytime soon, he also calls for such violence to be replaced by reconciliation, solidarity, and forgiveness. Okay? So the next question is the pity of war. The pity war distilled. Write a note on the importance of this line in the context of the poem and Owen's poetry in general. So as he sets the scenes of the poem describing the deep dark tunnel in which he finds himself, the speaker describes war as a fundamentally destructive force. Indeed, titanic wars have cut the tunnels, okay? So in other words, war created hell itself. So that particular place was known as hell. So the violence of the battle has even deprived enemy soldier of his humanity. Instead being a full human being, he is a visionary. He has a vision to be reduced to being a specter, spirit or a ghost. The speaker thus portrays war as force that permanently damages and diminishes both landscape and the people who fought. Though the enemy soldier hopes that people might be convinced, if only they knew the truth of war, to turn away from violence, he doesn't see any way that his hope will come true. He's been killed in battle and his death will serve to justify more killings. And in cruel irony revealed only at the end of the poem, he was killed by the poem's speaker, the very person to whom he addresses his long meditation on the futility of war. Nevertheless, the enemy soldier addresses the speaker as his friend, suggesting that they should have been friends. War was obscured, but it has destroyed the solidarity and the friendship that they should have been sharing. Identify and elaborate on the elements in the poem that make it a war poem. So the poem begins with the speaker escaping from the battle, heading down to the deep dark tunnel. Then the Titanic walls had groined or cut into granite's bedrock beneath the battlefield. It's clear right from the start that this poem isn't going to treat war as something glorious or heroic. So for instance, now the soldier is running away from the fighting. So the reference to the Titanic wars also suggests that humanity has had a long, devastating history of violence. This might in part be an allusion to the actual ship, that is the Titanic, which sunk 6 years before Evans wrote this poem. As such, the word evokes a sense of destruction and waste on massive scale. So the poem stages this betrayal in its final lines, where the enemy soldier reveals who kills him, the speaker himself. So this line is little paradoxical. One might wonder how the soldiers can be both enemies and friends at the same time. But the enemy soldiers' implication is clear. They are only enemies because their countries have decided to fight each other. They might have the same hopes, same dreams, but this is the bitter irony that all devastation, horror and dehumanization that the poem describes is unnecessary. In fantasizing about a better world, a world in which the two soldiers are friends instead of enemies. So the soldiers demonstrate just how unnecessary these brutal and horrifying these wars has made the world. Okay. So this is the poem stating Strange Wars by Wilfred Owen, which is a war poem and one of the prominent poems in that century.